Hey, what's up, you guys? I wanted to talk about the whole racism, colorism, culture stealing issue going on in Genshin Impact right now because I just wanted to talk about this because this has been rolling around in my mind and I wanted to see what you guys think. I'm going to let you guys know now that this is going to be a pretty nuanced take. So I highly recommend watching to the end of the video to see what the entire take is because there's a lot of different pieces and parts that I want to talk about. If you can't handle the nuance and you just want me to see me as picking sides or whatever about this issue, highly recommend you just don't watch, or you could just go ahead and leave a comment and tell me how horrible I am. I've seen plenty of it. It's fine. Subscribe. Put out a tweet recently kind of saying that I'm taking a bit of a different approach to content creation, more so that I don't want to continue producing content and thinking of everything as being content. I sort of just want to make things that I'm interested in, talk about things that I'm interested in, and follow my joy, because this whole thing is supposed to be my dream. And recently, this sort of habit I've had of seeing things as content and production and producing content to be seen has sort of made me feel more like a product and less like a creative individual and less of an entertainer. So what I want to talk about is this whole thing where they've recently released new information about Natlan for Genshin. They've shown a bunch of the new characters and showcased the region a bit in a trailer, in a live stream. And so I wanted to talk about this because a lot of people are upset because this is a region that is supposed to be inspired by a couple of different regions, ancient, Mesoamerican cultures, the Philippines. I've also seen Africa. There's a couple of different places where they've kind of pulled inspiration from Natlan, and all of the characters are pasty Elmer's school glue white, and people are pretty upset about this. So I want to start with a couple of different base facts about how I feel and then get into some more detailed stuff. First of all, I think it is not necessarily really a color issue. I think this is a culture issue. I think people are more than in their right and valid in their feeling that it is disrespectful and valid in their anger. My immediate reaction to something like this is like, okay, well, Genshin Impact has had this problem literally since release. This isn't new. It's been complained about before. It'll be complained about again. And I don't think that there's much to really be done to fix it. And I'm not sure that I genuinely believe that complaining about it on Twitter does all that much. I think for me, the biggest thing about this is that I don't actually think it's specifically the racism issue or the colorism issue. I actually think that the issue is with the practice of stealing cultures that Hoyoverse has done in Genshin several times, because all of these regions are heavily inspired by particular real-world reasons, usually a couple of them at the same time. And what Hoyoverse likes to do is mix and match the parts that are the most marketable and put them on characters to give them a little bit of flair, and sort of take a couple of different cultures, put them in a Tupperware and shake it up, and then give you a character that is based on this culture. I think it is very valid and rightful for people to feel frustrated. It's like, okay, well, you took from my culture and you've put it on this skinny, freaking Twinkie little white boy. I think that makes sense that people feel offended by that. They sort of pick pieces of parts of different cultures for each of these regions that are like marketable or pretty or good for like a character design or make it more distinct, like not really ever getting into it or showing any really interesting parts of that culture. It does feel a little weird and disrespectful. A really good example of this with two Natlan characters is one of the characters is named after a Mayan sun god, I believe, and another one is actually named after a Yoruba Orisha, which is sort of a godly figure, a deity figure. Those two characters are actually based off of like real world religious figures. And granted, Mayan religion obviously not really practiced anymore. However, Yoruba is still a major practice in Africa, to my knowledge, and they have taken the culture and taken like the name, and it's even like kind of a bastardized version of the name, and then put it on this little Twinkie white boy with some tattoos on his arm, and it obviously feels disrespectful. There are other games that have made a character based off of that Orisha and done it very respectfully and paid attention to the religious aspects of that and been respectful to the culture. And so I don't think that this this is so much the color problem. I think in a lot of ways, this is about this practice of sort of taking parts of religion, taking parts of like real world people's lives and bastardizing them to make them marketable, which feels like crappy, and then also putting it on a white body, which additionally feels kind of crappy. But I think that this is only really an issue in Genshin Impact, despite the fact that none of Hoyoverse's games have any, melanated characters really, or they have very few, not none, I don't want to say none, but very few melanated characters in any of Hoyoverse's titles. And actually this is true among a lot of gacha games. I mean, if you want to talk about it, Wuthering Waves doesn't have a lot of non-white characters. Actually, they don't have any now that I think about it, but a lot of gacha games don't really make a lot of melanated characters. And the only reason I think that this is specifically a problem for Genshin Impact is because they so clearly take very heavy inspiration from real world cultures and real world places. The same thing was in Sumru, where they took a lot of inspiration from Middle Eastern and Indian culture, like South Indian culture. They also did not have a lot of melanated characters. I think that this is really a culture issue and not necessarily so much like the color issue, which is why I don't necessarily believe that just putting a color of skin on a character Twitter as an edit is really like an effective form of protest or really anything. I also don't know that it's necessarily that respectful to just slap dark skin on a character with, fine straight hair and all of that stuff. But the thing that is sort of the reason that I wanted to talk about this, and the thing that's been rolling around my head, is there's sort of been this backlash against Genshin Impact creators talking about this on Twitter, where people are like, okay, well, if you don't like it, then put your money where your mouth is, quit then. And I think the obvious response is like, it's my fucking job. What do you want me to do? Like, I can't quit. There's a reality here where you're not going to be able to do anything with Genshin Impact. I think it's pretty well known that Hoyoverse doesn't often change anything significant after a character has been announced. I don't know if there's been any real, actual examples of that happening. This is not a new problem. This is an old problem, and it'll be a problem in the future as well. Even if the intention is not to virtue signal, right? The intention is to be an activist. Because there is nothing to do, and because realistically, y'all aren't protesting by not playing the game or not spending money on the game, people are gonna call you a virtue signaler anyway, because ultimately, all of your activism and all of your concern sort of means nothing other than to go on Twitter and complain about something and get good boy points for it, even if that is not specifically your intention. This doesn't affect me because I don't play Genshin Impact and I don't plan on playing Genshin Impact ever again, but I understand why people are upset by this practice of Hoyoverse and are upset by it. I guess a lot of it is that I wonder, it's like, what are you gonna do about it? Okay, you don't like it. You didn't like it the first many times that they've done it. They've already done it a bunch of times. You don't like it now. You're not gonna like it the next time they do it because it's gonna happen again. So what are you gonna do? It just sort of comes off as like flat and meaningless when so many people complain about it and are angry about it and are so righteously, upset. But really all they're doing is kind of posting paragraphs on Twitter about this issue. And I'm not saying you have to do anything. I'm just saying that you can't necessarily be all that surprised if people call you a virtue signaler when the game that you're complaining about has a known history of doing this and will do it again, and you realistically are not going to be able to change it. I think the way that Hoyoverse handles taking from cultures outside of Chinese culture, which is, it's a Chinese corporation, definitely is understandably seen as disrespectful, especially when they then slap it on a white twink boy body or a white girl body, However, it's not going to change. You can't do anything about it, and it kind of is what it is. This is not me sort of giving a stamp of approval to this practice. It's more so just acknowledging that it is there. There's a reality that most gacha games don't make a wide variety of diverse characters. I'm sure somebody can point out a gacha game that has more diversity, but I mean, most games in general are not very good about this. And it's especially true in gacha because I would expect, this is an assumption on my part, that most likely a lot of those characters sell better. They also tend to make, at least in Hoyoverse, it seems like if you think about a lot of the more melanated characters, they tend to make them worse. If you think about Dea and Arlen, the starter Ice 4-star that is like the Luke's brother but adopted thing. And so I suspect that they probably don't sell as well. It allows people to project more onto characters. It's gross and crappy and it sucks. And I think it would be cool for them to be more respectful of showing off cultures, because a lot of the cultures that they're taking from are actually really cool. But ultimately, they're marketing. The whole thing is marketing. Everything they do is marketing. There's nothing else to it. They make characters to sell pixels. They make regions to make those characters more interesting, to make the story interesting, to sell those pixels. Ultimately, there's nothing to do unless you can take away enough money that they actually care, which I'm gonna be real is gonna be very, very difficult considering these are global games where the vast majority of the profit doesn't come from the West. I think it is a lazy way to create different identifiable regions in Genshin Impact to just sort of take interesting parts from a bunch of different cultures and shake them up and then present them as like this new thing. Taking directly from the real world can be a really cool and beautiful thing, but ultimately what they're doing is taking bits and pieces and watering it down into something kind of crappy and shitty, and it's lame and boring. I guess my real question is, like, if you have a problem with this and it does upset you, are you gonna do anything about it? Or are you gonna keep playing Genshin Impact? And are you going to keep spending money on Genshin Impact? And are you going to keep making videos about every cool thing, the next awesome thing, the next poggers thing that Genshin Impact did? Because if so, I'm not sure you're really having the effect you think you are when you type on Twitter about how terrible and bad Genshin is and how awful Hoyoverse is. Ultimately, the diversity of characters is a problem in like almost every game ever. Not everyone, but like a lot of them. And it's definitely a problem in gacha. What do you think about this? I think that it would be cool if they had more diversity in the characters. To me, one of those things that's like a systematic thing that's not really going to be changeable. I'm not going to get my pitchfork over it because, again, I don't play the game and I have no plans on playing the game, and I also don't think that there's much a lot of people can do to change it. Not that the word of the people doesn't matter at all. It can, but we've seen that Hoyoverse doesn't necessarily care most of the time. I just wanted to share my thoughts on this. I don't know if this is a desired kind of content for me, but I was thinking about it. I think that's kind of all I have to say. I'm sorry for this kind of rambling mess. Or maybe I'm not sorry. You're welcome for this rambling mess. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are you upset about this whole situation? Are you upset about Natlin not showing more diversity in the skin tones? Do you agree that maybe it's more of a culture issue and less of a skin tone issue? How do you feel about the situation? How do you feel about the way Twitter is handling it? Because, I mean, as usual, I think Twitter is handling it pretty fucking poorly with a lack of nuance that is almost childlike, to be honest with you. And I have seen a couple of people choosing to boycott the game, which is cool. I just don't know what the effect will be. And ultimately, activism is sort of about action, and just talking about stuff on Twitter doesn't really seem like it matters. So let me know what you think down below. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!